does not consider what you do with the money that they give you?
Well, like I said, the IMF is a body of the UN National Security Council, and was opened in 1944. Like, we all knew that it was not intended to develop the African nation, because it was created before the African nations were given their independence, not a one which they fought for, but the one which was given to them by negotiation. So we have to understand that that structure alone is, how will I call it, is already is opposing as far as our development as a people is concerned. And we have to also understand that it is absolutely correct and true that we can do without loans. If we look on the context in which we are today, it is because they are the systems and structures which have been designed that way to give the Cameroonian the impression that you need to borrow in order to grow. But like I said, every individual, like I will agree with the man at a certain point that it is true that your GDP, it all depends on your human resources. But when there are systems that have been put in place which deprives your human resources in absolutely how will I call it, bringing out the ability to develop their own economy, to have access to their own resources in such a way that they can use those things in developing their life and developing their nation and meeting the demands of their society, that becomes a challenge. And that is why I'm saying that the fact alone that we have France that stands as a guarantor or a mediator between Cameroon and the IMF makes it already a crime against humanity and abuse to human rights, because as a matter of fact, that already shows us clearly that we do not have sovereignty. Because if we had sovereignty, then we should have been dealing with whoever we pleases. We are talking here about $700 and something million. Davido in Nigeria bought a car for $300 million. That is a son we have in Africa who bought a single car for $300 million. So we are not having a problem here with money. So no one can tell me that we really need to borrow in terms to grow, when we already possess the things that we need to develop our society. We have what it takes to draw the world to ourselves and develop the world based on what we have. When they were building Dubai, the king at that time of Dubai told the son, he said, build and they will come. He said, how are we going to build the economy? He said, build and they will come. Africa, what explains the fact that we have the multinational corporations in Africa is based on what Africa has. So you cannot say we are poor because our human resources or our human productivity is not there to build the economy. No, when those structures have been put in place, it affects the mentality and the behavior of the people, whereby the people cannot exploit what they have. Because, for example, let's say you have 100 million and then somebody is keeping your capital and then expecting you now to grow through loan and does not give you rights to have access to your own capital. How will you not live on credit? So we cannot build the theory, seeing what maybe we are giving another comparison like China building for Africa cannot be compared with China. Africa cannot be compared with America. We are not building America or China in Africa. We are building Africa for Africans. Let us use what we have. Africans have the capacity to use what they have to develop themselves, and they don't need. We have seen the examples clearly on leaders, individual leaders who have set the path. And these are the examples that we must use as the basis of our analysis and not be making analysis of other countries. We are not doing China here. We are doing Africa for Africans. We saw with Gaddafi. Gaddafi built a paradise in desert, lend money to other nations. As a matter of fact, Sarkozy was made president in France from what he got from Gaddafi as support for money which Gaddafi borrowed him. Gaddafi built a Libya where he had nothing to do with the rest of the world. As a matter of fact, Libya was neutral from the world. And that was a major challenge. We saw with Thomas Sankara. These are men who built Africa for Africans, whereby Africa did not need the intervention or the suggestion or the opinion or aid from the West. That simply means that Africans have the capacity until in Burkina Faso, they had produced their own dresses where everything they consume came from their own people, came from Africa. So we cannot buy the terminology of the IMF. As a matter of fact, they are using the special drawing rights. They are not giving you, how can I explain to you? It's a level of slavery. It's a level of politics where it's hard to understand. IMF, as a matter of fact, is not a bank where people go to store money. They have what they call special drawing rights. That simply means that if they are going to give you $100 billion, they are going to print it out in what they call the special drawing rights, and then they convert it to dollars before they give it to you. So we have to understand that. We have to understand that what we need to be talking today, like I've been saying, we need to get ourselves into the position where we as a people, we need to fight for our sovereignty. We saw what the ECOWAS is doing, what Nana Addo is doing in Ghana. Ghana has been proving that Africa does not need to live on loan. Loan is just the idea that being part of the United Nations, it's a bank that loans to all nations that are members of the United Nations. But as a matter of fact, Africa at the level of the United Nations is a subject matter. That is why Africa is not giving veto power at the level of the UN National Security Council. So we are not part of a united body which seeks to exploit the African people at the expense of its own population and I mean, looting away the resources of Africa. Do you know, as a matter of fact, that the economies today that we are boasting of, whether it is China, it's America, it's Europe, all of their legacies and economy and empires were built from the resources and the human resources of Africa? How do you explain the fact that Europe was built by Africans? Its resources is what survives the economy. Same thing with America. China today now is building its own economy in Africa, and then you are telling the Africans that they need to borrow in order to grow. When the other developing nations, the world nations today that we are claiming them to be the superpower, they have survived from Africa. So if they could use Africa in building their economy, then we can use Africans and African resources in building Africa. We don't need loans from outside. We don't need anything from the world, because absolutely what we are getting from them is what they took from us. So we have to be wise here and understand that our leaders have been tied at a certain level where strings are attached. In other words, they do not have they cannot make a good decision. Every good decision they want to take is always at the detriment of their own population. So that's the way our leaders have been tied. So we, the younger generation, who makes the majority, whose future we are talking here today, needs to understand that we need to regroup, seek for our sovereignty, fight for our sovereignty, and be able to create our own economy, create our own banks, and have our own currency. That is a path in which we need to. As a matter of fact, as long as we keep France in Cameroon as a guarantor or as a colonial master or whatever, and keep using the French CFA, we will never ever survive, because the France's economy depends purely in what it gets from Africa. Without Africa, France would really be zero, and that is a simple truth. So to me, I find it a huge challenge to see African head of state going to succumb themselves on organizations that have been built well-built, blooded economy and legacy which they have exploited from the African people, from the African resources. So I would say that if I want to give the right definition of GDP, I will not call it any more human resources. I will call it both the human resources and the natural resources of that land or the people of that area. So we as Africans, it is true that, like the man talk about Congo DRC, who does not understand what is happening in Congo DRC? We know Congo is the richest country, but it's not poor because it lacks resources. It is not poor because it lacks human resources. It is poor is because the people are not given access to their own resources, and these are the structures which we are saying that we need to get rid of these structures if Africa is going to survive.
Okay, Apostle.